You ever find yourself staring at a giant spreadsheet, just wishing you could, I don't know, talk to it? Like just ask it questions and get answers back? Well, that's pretty much the magic of SQL. And you should think of it less like some scary programming language and more like a super powerful toolbox for your data. So for the next few minutes, we're going to open up that toolbox and pull out the most essential commands you'll ever need. Ready? Let's dive in.
So here's the game plan. We're going to start with the 4 commands you'll probably use every single day. Then we'll level up and learn how to ask much smarter questions. After that, we'll switch gears and actually build the structure of a database. And finally, we'll wrap up with how to control who can do what with your data. So first things first, what even is SQL? Well, you can think of it as the universal language for talking to databases. But the coolest part, it's non-procedural. Now that's a fancy word that just means you tell it what you want, not how to get it. You just ask the question, and the database does all the heavy lifting to find the answer. Pretty neat, right? Now, SQL really has 2 main jobs. On one hand, you've got DML, which stands for Data Manipulation Language. This is all about working with the data that's already inside your database. You know, reading it, changing it, adding new stuff. Then you've got DDL, the Data Definition Language. This is for building the house itself, creating the tables that are going to hold all your information in the first place. All right, let's jump into the absolute fundamentals. These are the 4 commands that are really the bedrock of any daily data work. You'll often hear them called by the acronym CRUD. That's create, read, update, and delete. First up is select. And trust me, you're going to use this one more than any other command by far. Anytime you want to ask the database for some information, you're using select. You just tell it which columns you want to see and from what table, and bam, it pulls the data for you. It's really that simple. So, how do we get new information into the database? Well, for that, we use the insert command. This lets you add a brand new row, or what we call a record, to a table. You just specify the table, tell it which columns are getting the new data, and then you provide the values. Easy peasy. Okay, but what if you need to fix a mistake or just change some data that's already in there? That's where update comes in. You tell it which table to change and what the new value should be. But, and listen up because this is absolutely critical, you have to use the where clause to specify exactly which row to modify. If you forget it, you'll update every single row in your table. And, of course, to get rid of data, we use delete. Now, just like with update, that where clause is your best friend and your most important safety feature. It lets you pinpoint the exact rows you want to remove, which keeps you from accidentally deleting your entire data set. Okay, so we've got the 4 core actions down pat. Now let's really level up our game. We're going to see how to add some extra tools to our select statement, which will let us ask much, much smarter and more specific questions of our data. Remember that where clause? It's basically your super-powered filter. You can get incredibly specific with it. You can use standard comparisons like equals or greater than. You can check if a value is between 2 others, see if it's in a specific list of items, use like to find patterns in text, or even check if a value is just totally missing with eyes null. But what if you don't want a giant list of every single sale? What if you just want the grand total? For that, we use something called aggregate functions. They do a calculation across maybe thousands of rows and just give you back one single summary value. You can count your users, sum up your revenue, find the average price, or get the min and max values in a dataset. And this is where things get really powerful. Think of group by and having as a power duo. First, you use group by to bundle your rows into summary groups, like, say, calculating total sales per city. Then, having lets you filter those groups. So you could ask to see only the cities that had sales over $1 million. It's kind of like a where clause, but it's specifically for your summaries. Okay, here's a classic problem. You've got a customer's name in one table, but their order details are in a completely different table. How in the world do you bring all that information together into a single answer? The answer is one of SQL's absolute killer features, the join. A join lets you combine rows from 2 or more tables, as long as they have a related column between them. You just tell it which column the tables have in common, and it magically stitches all that data together for you. All right, time to put on our architect hats. We're going to switch from DML, which is about fiddling with data, to DDL, the Data Definition Language. This is how we actually build the containers, the tables that are going to hold all our precious data. The create table command is basically the blueprint. For every table, you have to define its name, what columns it's going to have,
the type of data each column holds, like text or numbers or dates, and you also pick a primary key, which is just a way to make sure every single row is unique.
Of course, sometimes structures need to change. Alter table is your renovation tool. It lets you modify a table that already exists, like adding a new column. Drop table, on the other hand, well, that's the demolition command. It permanently deletes the table and everything in it, so yeah, use that one with caution.
So for our last section, we're talking all about control. How can we create simplified, custom views of our data? And maybe more importantly, how do we manage who gets to see or do what with it? A view is just a brilliant idea. It looks and acts exactly like a table, but here's the secret. It isn't one. It's actually just a stored select query. This is amazing for simplifying really complicated queries into a single object, or for security, like restricting access to only certain columns or rows.
And finally, let's talk about security. It really boils down to two simple commands. Grant is how you give users specific permissions, like the ability to select data or insert new data. And if you ever need to take those permissions away, well, revoke is the command for that. Simple as that. So there you have it. That's your essential SQL toolbox. You've got your DML commands for all the day-to-day data handling, your DDL commands for building and changing the structure, and your DCL, the data control language, for managing all the security and permissions. Whew, we've covered a ton of ground really fast, from just reading data all the way to building the database itself. You now have the core commands you need to start exploring, shaping, and controlling information. So the only real question left is, where are you going to start?